At a luxury hotel, a millionaire CEO is stunned to see a young red-headed maid with green eyes identical to his own. He soon discovers she is his secret daughter. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The sun glinted off the mirrored windows of the Harrington Majestic, a luxury hotel perched in the heart of downtown. Thomas Harrington, CEO of Harrington Global Enterprises, stepped out of his private elevator onto the polished marble lobby, exuding an aura of control. His tailored suit, impeccable posture, and sharp gaze all signaled power, yet there was a restless energy in his stride today. Usually he visited his properties only for scheduled inspections or grand openings, but this time he arrived unannounced. A rumor had reached him about a new maid whose presence stirred whispers among staff. It was odd that gossip would capture his interest, but the details piqued his curiosity. He decided to investigate in person. Nothing in his world happened without reason, and he intended to uncover it. With purposeful strides, Thomas crossed the spacious lobby, ignoring the discreet stares of guests who recognized him from business magazines. His phone buzzed with urgent messages from investors, but he silenced it. Today, his focus lay on the secrets within these walls. He approached the reception desk and nodded at the manager, who flushed nervously. "I'd like a brief update on the new staff," Thomas said evenly. The manager stammered, flipping through a binder until he found the name, Elena Sullivan. Hired 2 weeks ago. No prior hotel experience, yet her references checked out. Thomas studied her photo, a slender young woman with delicate features and downcast eyes. Something about her face tugged at him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. There was a vague familiarity that set his nerves on edge. Without further explanation, Thomas headed for the service elevator. If this maid was causing a stir, he wanted to see her in action. The hum of machinery greeted him as he stepped into the staff quarters, a stark contrast to the opulent guest areas. Linen carts, mop buckets, and the faint smell of detergent lined the hallways. Employees hurried past with polite nods, though unease flickered in their eyes. Thomas was known to be a fair but demanding boss. Halfway down the corridor, he spotted a young woman struggling with a cumbersome laundry bag. Her posture slumped under the weight, strands of light brown hair escaping her neat bun. When she looked up, their gazes locked. Recognition sparked, but neither moved. In her wide eyes, he saw shock, fear, and something else. Thomas recovered first, stepping forward to alleviate her burden. "You must be Elena," he said softly. She nodded, too stunned to speak. As he eased the heavy laundry bag from her arms, he noticed her trembling hands. There was a vulnerability to her that he couldn't ignore. Her eyes, a warm hazel, shone with apprehension. "Thank you, sir," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. He set the bag aside and studied her face. A memory tugged at him, something from years ago, but it slipped through his grasp like mist. "Are you all right?" She lowered her gaze, nodding quickly. "Just overwhelmed, Mr. Harrington." That last name, spoken in her timid tone, sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. He found himself strangely protective of this fragile young woman. Over the following days, Thomas made subtle inquiries about Elena. Housekeeping supervisors praised her diligence. Other staff mentioned she kept to herself, rarely socializing. Yet nobody knew anything about her past. No family details, no personal friends. Despite his usual distance from daily operations, Thomas couldn't help noticing her more often. Sometimes he'd spot her cleaning a corridor in the early morning, hair neatly tucked away, eyes cast downward. Other times she'd slip out of the lobby at the end of her shift, hugging a worn sweater around her small frame. Each glimpse of her stirred a perplexing mixture of unease and familiarity. He couldn't explain it, but he felt compelled to learn more. Something about her seemed heartbreakingly familiar. It was as though he was encountering a forgotten ghost returned. Late one evening, he found her alone in the hallway, struggling to push a heavy housekeeping cart. "Let me help," he offered. She started to protest, but he steadied the cart before she could refuse. Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I'm fine, really." He shook his head gently. "I insist." They wheeled the cart together, an odd sight. One of the city's most powerful men assisting a timid maid. She kept her gaze lowered, but he sensed her discomfort. "Elena," he said softly, "I'm not here to reprimand you. You do excellent work. I've heard nothing but praise." A wary smile tugged at her lips. "That's kind of you to say." In her quiet gratitude, he sensed a deep sadness, like she carried secrets heavier than the cart itself. Over the next week, their paths crossed more frequently. Thomas would casually ask if she needed help, or if everything was all right. She remained polite but guarded, never volunteering personal information. Despite her reticence, he noticed little details, a subtle resemblance to someone he once knew, the curve of her chin, the arch of her brow. It nagged at him like a puzzle piece that wouldn't fit. One afternoon, he found himself in his office, sifting through old photographs. Memories of his youth, images of acquaintances from long ago, but it was fruitless. He couldn't place Elena's face in any part of his past, yet his instincts screamed that she was linked to him in ways neither understood. He resolved to uncover the truth no matter how far it hid. One late night, Thomas was finalizing reports in his suite when a muffled sob caught his attention from the corridor. He stepped outside to see Elena huddled against the wall, tears staining her cheeks. Concern overrode etiquette. "What happened?" he asked, voice low. She tried to mask her sorrow, but failed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. I'll return to my duties." He gently reached for her arm. "No, tell me." A brief silence, then she spoke through trembling lips. "I got a call. My mother's hospital bills are overdue, and if I don't pay soon..." She choked on the rest of her sentence, eyes brimming with worry. Thomas felt his chest tighten with unexpected empathy. He barely knew her, yet he couldn't stand seeing her in such distress. Something within him. He guided her into his suite, offering a seat on the plush sofa. She looked astonished by his kindness, but desperation overrode pride. Between halting breaths, Elena confessed her situation. A sick mother back home, bills piling up, and no one else to help. Thomas listened intently, a rare empathy surfacing in him. "I'll cover the expenses," he said without hesitation, surprising them both. Her eyes widened. "I can't accept that, sir. It's too much." But he waved away her objections. "Think of it as a loan if you prefer. Pay it back over time. Your mother shouldn't suffer." Emotion washed over her face. She whispered a tremulous thank you, tears of relief mingling with lingering fear. He gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, never guessing fate loomed. The next morning, Thomas arranged for a secure payment to the hospital. Elena was stunned by his efficiency, but also uneasy. He noticed the conflict in her eyes and asked her to join him in a quiet corner of the lobby. That was when she confessed a deeper truth. Her mother's illness wasn't the only burden. She had left home at 17, fleeing a past she refused to detail. Her mother supported her, but money had always been scarce. Thomas listened, grappling with an unexpected protectiveness that blossomed whenever he saw her struggle. As she spoke, he caught a glimpse of something in her features, an echo of his own mother's photograph. That realization jolted him. Could Elena be related? His heartbeat pounded, stirring memories he never expected to face. Daughter? Elena's tears welled up again as Thomas's realization struck deeper. His pulse throbbed with the possibility that this young woman, the same woman cleaning floors and dusting rooms in his finest hotel, might share his blood. He wanted to deny it, to chalk it up to coincidence. But each glance at her delicate features, each tilt of her chin, each fleeting expression, only sharpened his suspicion. He recalled a night more than 2 decades past when everything changed in ways he never understood. He had been a restless college graduate, ambitious but naive, attending a charitable gala where the air shimmered with promise. That night he met a woman named Rebecca. She was quiet but bright, exuding a gentle warmth that drew him in. Their connection was swift, but fate and timing were never kind. The next morning she disappeared from his life, leaving behind only a folded letter that said she was leaving town. No one had ever been able to tell him what became of her afterward. He found himself recalling that memory with a mixture of nostalgia and regret, as Elena explained how her mother once worked as a florist, then fell ill. She spoke of a father she never knew, a man her mother described vaguely, someone who never even found out she existed. Elena's gaze stayed locked on the plush carpet when she uttered that last phrase. Thomas's mind swirled, caught between wanting to claim her as his daughter and fearing the heartbreak if he was wrong. He asked, voice unsteady, "Your mother, did she ever mention his name?" Elena shook her head. She refused, said it was for my own good. The frustration in her voice told him she had never stopped longing for answers. He cleared his throat. "Perhaps we can find out. There may be ways." But Elena recoiled. "No, please. We can't open old wounds. I only told you because you've been so kind, and I didn't want you thinking I'm just a freeloader." She swallowed hard, looking vulnerable and proud in equal measure. "I'll pay back every cent, I promise." Thomas's heart twisted at the thought. He imagined her toiling for years to repay hospital bills. "Let's not discuss repayment right now," he said firmly. "Focus on your mother's health." She shook her head, about to protest, but he cut her off. "Elena, it's final." With that, he gently placed a card in her hand, his personal line, rarely given out. "If anything happens, medical emergencies, unexpected costs, call me immediately." She stared at the card as though it might vanish. "Thank you," she whispered, her tone carrying gratitude and trepidation. Thomas nodded once, unsure what else to say. He couldn't admit his suspicions yet. The last thing he wanted was to raise false hope in her or complicate matters. If his memory served him right, the age lined up. She had said she was 21. That would mean her mother met someone around the exact period Thomas vaguely recalled. The tension in his chest grew more insistent. Over the subsequent week, the question gnawed at him relentlessly. If Elena was his child, how was he to proceed? Did he have a moral responsibility to reveal his suspicion or confirm it first through indisputable proof? And how would she react if he confronted her? She'd endured hardship her entire life, struggling alone with her mother's illness. Would discovering her father was a high-profile CEO shock her in ways that harmed her more? He weighed each scenario and decided to proceed methodically, the way he approached everything else. He contacted a trusted private investigator to gather information about Elena's background. It felt invasive, but he argued with himself that it was necessary. If he was indeed her father, he needed clarity. 2 days later, Thomas found himself in a quiet corner of the hotel's business center, meeting with the investigator he had used for years, a discreet man named Mark Parsons. Mark handed over a slim file. "Not much. Her mother is Rebecca Sullivan, and she's in a hospital in their small hometown. No mention of a father on Elena's birth certificate. Seems like Rebecca never named one." Thomas's throat constricted. "Rebecca Sullivan," he echoed, remembering the woman he met at that long-ago gala. Her last name, then? Had it been Sullivan? He recalled she might have introduced herself with a different surname, or perhaps he had never asked. The memory was too hazy. Mark noticed his reaction but remained professional. "There are no direct leads to you, sir, unless you want me to dig deeper." Thomas shook his head. "No, that's enough. Thank you." He wasn't ready to cross the line into a full background check that might violate Elena's trust. He wanted proof, but not at the expense of her privacy. Stepping out of that meeting, he felt the intangible bond strengthen. The name alone confirmed the connection. This was more than chance. That evening, as he strolled through the corridors, he glimpsed Elena exiting a suite, vacuum in tow. He paused in the shadows, observing her gentle, deliberate movements. She carried herself with quiet determination, trying hard not to disturb the guest who lingered at the door. Something about her kindness, the way she bowed her head respectfully, reminded him of the fleeting hours he'd spent with Rebecca long ago. Without warning, he felt his eyes burn. Here was a daughter he might have had by his side all this time, if only fate hadn't stolen that chance. Stepping forward, he pretended to bump into her by coincidence. "Everything all right?" he asked, layering concern in his voice. "Yes, sir," she said, offering a slight smile that caused a twinge in his chest. She shifted anxiously, as if reading some unspoken tension. I wanted to let you know I'll be taking the weekend off. My mother's doctors have arranged a critical test, and I need to be there." Thomas, swallowing the surge of concern, nodded. "Of course. You'll have as many days as you need. Let me know if you need assistance with travel or accommodations." She looked embarrassed but admitted her finances were tight. He didn't hesitate. "Take my driver. He'll handle your round trip. No arguments." Tears pooled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she murmured, voice breaking on the last syllable. As she walked away, he felt a magnet pull at his heart. He wanted to run after her, to tell her everything he suspected. But the fear of upending her world pinned his feet to the floor. That weekend, Thomas found himself checking his phone incessantly, waiting for any word from Elena. No messages came, and an uncharacteristic worry gnawed at him. Normally, he prided himself on composure, but her silence tormented him. He paced his immaculate penthouse, glancing at the phone every hour. By the second night, he caved and dialed the number he'd given her, voicemail. He tried not to panic. Finally, on Sunday afternoon, his phone buzzed. He answered in a heartbeat. "Mr. Harrington," came Elena's tired voice. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. My mother's test. It's bad news. She needs more extensive treatment." Thomas closed his eyes, exhaling. "I'm sorry. We'll do whatever is necessary." She sniffled. "I don't have that kind of money, sir. I can't accept more loans from you." His tone rose, gentle but firm. "This is no longer a question of loans, Elena. Your mother's life is at stake. I'll handle it." She tried to protest, but he wouldn't hear it. "We'll discuss details when you're back. Focus on your mother." When she returned late that evening, her eyes were red from weeping, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Thomas met her in the hotel's private lounge. "Let me settle you into a suite," he suggested gently. "You shouldn't be alone in the staff quarters." She stared at the ground, too drained to object. Quietly, he escorted her upstairs to one of the smaller but comfortable VIP rooms. As she took in the luxurious space, soft lighting, plush armchairs, a sweeping view of the city, she let out a shaky breath. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered. Before he could form a cautious reply, she continued, voice edged with sorrow. "People don't just offer massive help for free." There was a flicker of suspicion in her tired gaze. Thomas hesitated, his heart pounding. He couldn't reveal the entire truth yet, so he chose his words carefully. "I have my reasons," he said softly, "but the simplest explanation is that I've grown to care about you and your well-being." Her lips parted in surprise, tears threatening to spill again. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly, still not fully convinced but too emotionally worn to question him further. He left the suite after ensuring Elena had everything she might need. The expression on her face haunted him, equal parts gratitude and perplexity. In the hallway, his mind raced with conflicting emotions, so intense he had to pause just to steady his breath. He still didn't know how to reveal the possibility that she could be his daughter. Should he request a discreet paternity test? Or speak to Rebecca directly, if her condition allowed? The thought of confronting a dying woman about a secret kept for 2 decades pressed on him with suffocating weight. Each step he took echoed his apprehension. For a man who regularly closed colossal business deals, this personal dilemma seemed insurmountable. He realized with a pang that all his wealth and power meant little if he couldn't protect the ones who mattered. He found himself lingering near the doorway to the suite, listening for any sign Elena might call out. All he heard was silence, broken only by the low hum of the air conditioning. Mustering the courage to trust his instincts, Thomas turned away and walked down the corridor with measured steps. He decided the next step would be contacting the hospital directly, hoping Rebecca was stable enough to talk. Perhaps, if it truly was the same woman he once knew, she would confirm the truth. Another wave of anxiety gripped him. If Rebecca was too ill, he might never learn precisely why she had vanished. And if he couldn't uncover the truth, Elena would be left adrift, never fully knowing who she was. That was a reality he refused to accept. The following morning, Thomas made several calls. First, he arranged additional funds for Rebecca's treatment, ensuring the medical center had every resource at their disposal. Then, he contacted the hospital director to request a private conversation with the patient known as Rebecca Sullivan. Initially, the director refused, citing confidentiality, until Thomas invoked his sponsorship of the facility. Reluctantly, the director agreed to set up a phone appointment if Rebecca consented. Thomas spent the rest of the day in a state of subdued tension, glancing at his phone every few minutes. Between corporate meetings and investor luncheons, his attention drifted to thoughts of Elena, alone in the plush suite upstairs, probably wrestling with her own worries and guilt. He hated the secrecy, but didn't see another way forward. Near sunset, a notification lit up his phone. The hospital was willing to connect him if Rebecca approved. Thomas retreated to his executive office and waited, phone cradled against his ear, pulse thudding. Finally, a nurse's voice came on, distant and hushed. "Sir, I have Ms. Sullivan here." Thomas inhaled sharply, bracing himself. A faint, weary voice replaced the nurse. "Yes? Hello?" He recognized that tone, though it had grown raspy and weak from illness. "Rebecca," he said quietly, trying to keep emotion from surfacing. "It's Thomas Harrington. We met a long time ago." A pause on the line, followed by a soft exhale that might have been a gasp. "Thomas," she murmured, sounding both regretful and relieved. "I never thought I'd hear your voice again." He closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The warmth in her gaze that night, her gentle laugh, how she'd brushed a stray hair from his forehead as they danced. Now her fragile whisper shook him. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something important." Another pause. "It's about Elena, isn't it?" She spoke as if she'd prepared for this moment for years. Thomas tightened his grip on the phone. "Yes," he answered. "I suspect she might be my daughter, but I don't want to upset her. Can you tell me the truth?" He heard her breathing, shallow and strained. "I never planned to hide her from you forever," she said sadly. "I was young and scared, and you were on the verge of a huge career. I didn't want to ruin your life." His heart twisted at those words. He wanted to shout that she should have told him, that he could have helped, that nothing would have been ruined. But guilt mingled with frustration. She'd made a choice, and now Elena had paid the price in hardship, confusion, and emptiness. "So it's true," he said quietly. "Elena is mine." Rebecca coughed weakly. "Yes. She was born 7 months after I left. I tried to reach out once, but your office changed, and I lost the nerve. By then your name was everywhere, and I thought she'd only be a burden to you." Thomas's throat tightened. "She's never been a burden," he whispered, the conviction in his voice surprising even him. "I wish I'd known sooner, but we'll figure it out now." A soft sigh came through the line. "Thomas, please take care of her if you can. She's all I have, and I'm not sure I'll recover. The doctors won't say it outright, but I can see it in their eyes." Her voice wavered, and Thomas's own eyes stung. In all his years of negotiations and power plays, he'd never felt so helpless. "I will," he promised, voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Whatever you need, I'll provide. And if the worst should happen, Elena will have a home with me." Silence followed, broken only by Rebecca's quiet sob. Then she murmured, "Thank you," before the nurse gently ended the call. For a long moment, Thomas simply stared at his phone, heart pounding with sorrow and resolve. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. He replayed Rebecca's words over and over, torn between grief for her deteriorating condition and fury at all the lost years. At last, he found himself outside the VIP suite door, knocking softly. Elena's voice floated through the door, subdued. "Come in." She was seated on the edge of the bed, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. A half-eaten sandwich lay forgotten on a small plate. The tension in her posture signaled she braced herself for more bad news. Thomas cleared his throat, stepping closer. He wanted to tell her everything. But how? Her mother had withheld the truth for so long. Would Elena see his sudden confession as betrayal or relief? He sank onto a chair across from her, feeling unexpectedly vulnerable. "I just spoke to your mother," he began gently. Elena's face lit with concern. "Is she all right? Did the tests—" She stopped, unable to complete the sentence, but he understood. "She's fighting," he said, forcing a trace of optimism into his tone. "Doctors are doing everything possible." Elena exhaled shakily, then frowned. "Wait, how did you get permission to speak to her?" Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I funded certain aspects of the hospital. That gave me a channel to communicate. She wanted me to reassure you she's in good hands." Elena's shoulders sagged with relief, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. "You're going to this length for us, but why?" He steeled himself, aware the time for half-truths was closing fast. "Because I care, Elena, and your mother trusts me. There's more I need to share, but only if you're ready." Her hands gripped the bedspread, knuckles whitening. "I'm not sure I ever will be," she confessed, voice trembling. "Everything's so overwhelming." Thomas felt the weight of her fear and knew that divulging her true parentage would not magically fix her turmoil. Still, each day he waited, she floundered in the unknown, oblivious to the profound bond already tying them together. Finally, he resolved to give her space, but also prepare for the conversation that would change both their lives. He reached over, covering her hand with his own, heart pounding at the contact. "Take your time," he said softly. "When you feel ready, I'll explain." She nodded, eyes filling with tears, and though no words passed between them, Thomas sensed that moment was coming soon. Neither could outrun the truth forever. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of the VIP suite, illuminating every speck of dust in a soft golden glow. Elena had barely slept. Her mind churned with concerns about her mother, her own future, and the unsettling kindness of Mr. Harrington. She was grateful for his help, Yet it puzzled her how a man so powerful and distant could show such warmth. Each time she tried to reconcile his generosity with the aloof businessmen she'd once glimpsed in magazine profiles, her thoughts tangled. Finally, she rose from the plush bed, tidied her hair, and resolved to face him. She still owed him thanks and perhaps an explanation of where she stood. Downstairs, Thomas Harrington stepped out of his office and looked around the hushed lobby. A stack of documents regarding the hotel's latest renovation project lay forgotten on his desk. Normally, he would have been immersed in financial summaries and strategic reports, but a private hope kept tugging at him. If Elena showed any sign of wanting to know more about her mother, about their strange bond, he was determined to open that door. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues overseas, but he silenced them without reading. Not yet, he thought, exhaling in frustration. He had a bigger priority now, one he had never anticipated. He was halfway through scanning the front desk logs when Elena emerged from the guest elevators. She spotted him immediately, hesitated, then approached with cautious steps. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, clothes she must have fetched from her staff quarters. Though her eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep, a quiet determination underpinned her expression. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she said, voice steady despite her fatigue. Thomas closed the logbook and turned to her. "Elena," he responded softly. "How are you holding up?" She inhaled, choosing her words with care. "I want to thank you again for everything you're doing. I can't imagine how I'd manage without your support right now." He motioned toward a seating area in the corner of the lobby, where plush chairs surrounded a glass coffee table. Once they were settled, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I keep telling you, it's not necessary to thank me. I'm just trying to help." She clasped her hands together, eyes flickering with uncertainty. "It doesn't feel right," she confessed. "I mean, no offense, but you barely know me. And yet, you've arranged money for my mother's care, you've given me a place to stay, you've almost treated me like family." At that final word, her voice caught. There it was, the glimmer of suspicion he'd expected. Thomas's heart clenched at her choice of phrase. It was both an unintentional nudge toward the truth and an echo of the vow he'd made to Rebecca. He lowered his gaze, summoning the courage to speak plainly. "I understand how confusing this must be." She waited, hands rigid in her lap. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to explain, fully, why I'm so invested. But it's not a simple story." He paused, watching her reaction. Her face paled slightly, but she nodded. I'd appreciate the truth," she whispered, bracing herself. Yet before he could utter another word, the hotel manager approached with an apologetic bow, announcing that their presence was needed in the conference room. An unexpected crisis with an important client had arisen. Thomas gave Elena a regretful look, promising quietly, "Let's continue this in a moment." She nodded, anxiety etched into her features, and he followed the manager away. Within the hour, Thomas dealt with the client's complaints, diffused tension among the staff, and secured a last-minute contingency plan. By the time he emerged, he was exhausted and inwardly frustrated. There would always be another interruption, another pressing matter that threatened to derail his personal mission. He scanned the lobby for Elena, but she wasn't there. A pang of dread seized him. He worried she might have lost her nerve or grown impatient for answers he hadn't yet given. But then the receptionist mentioned seeing Elena step outside for some fresh air. Thomas breathed easier, heading toward the side exit. He found her on a secluded terrace, meant for VIP functions, arms folded as she gazed at the city skyline. The dull roar of traffic drifted up from the streets below, mingling with the faint rustle of a nearby potted palm. Thomas walked over quietly and stood beside her. She turned at his approach, her expression wary. "Is everything okay, Mr. Harrington?" He nodded. "It's settled," he replied. "Though I'm sorry about the interruption." His hesitation hung in the air. "We can go somewhere private if you're still willing to hear me out." She gave a small nod, stepping aside to let him lead. They ended up in a private lounge adjacent to the hotel's top-floor restaurant, a serene space used for discreet business gatherings. Inside, tall windows showcased a sweeping panorama of the afternoon sun glinting off skyscrapers. He offered her a seat on a leather sofa and took a chair opposite. For a moment, neither spoke. The magnitude of what he was about to reveal pressed on his chest like an anvil. "Elena," he began, voice low, "when I said I had reasons for helping you, I didn't mean I pitied you or simply wanted to be charitable. The truth is, He paused, swallowing. How did one prepare someone for such a revelation? "A long time ago," he continued carefully, "I met a woman named Rebecca Sullivan. We spent only a brief time together, but it was enough. After that, she left. I never heard from her again. She recently confirmed to me that during that time she became pregnant." Elena's eyes darted sharply as if she guessed the next words before he said them. "She told me that child was you." The final statement hung in the stillness of the lounge. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. A flush of emotion ignited across her face, shock, anger, disbelief, all swirling uncontrollably. That can't be," she finally stammered, voice trembling. "My mother never mentioned you. She said my father never knew about me. She broke off, as if the reality stifled her ability to speak. Thomas leaned forward, wanting to reach out, but unsure if it would comfort or frighten her. "She was afraid," he said gently. "She felt I was too consumed by work, success, that I wouldn't have wanted to be a father. I only found out recently after speaking with her. She's extremely ill and—" Elena shot up from the sofa, eyes brimming with tears. "So, all this kindness, the money for her treatment, is because you think—" Her voice spiraled into disbelief. "You think you're my father?" Thomas stood, carefully maintaining distance, aware she might recoil if he moved too close. "I don't just think it," he said quietly. "I believe it's the truth. Your mother confirmed it." A strangled laugh escaped her, half sob, half hiccup. She pressed her hand to her forehead as though steadying herself. "All these years," she whispered, "I prayed he'd show up. Then I convinced myself there was no father, that he was just a fantasy, and now you're saying it's you?" Her eyes darted over him as if seeing him for the first time. The tall, sophisticated CEO she'd spent weeks tiptoeing around was now claiming a paternal role. Thomas felt his throat tighten. He realized nothing could have prepared her for this moment. He spoke softly. "I can't erase the past or the pain you've been through. But I'm here now. If you'll let me, I want to be part of your life." She regarded him with the raw hurt of someone betrayed by fate. "So, was my mother right? Would you have wanted me back then? Or was she just a secret you never had time for?" Each word landed like a blow, the heartbreak in her tone shredding his composure. Thomas swallowed the impulse to defend himself. "I wish she had told me," he admitted. "I swear I would have taken responsibility. I'm not perfect, but I wouldn't have turned my back on you." Elena's tears finally broke free. She sank back onto the sofa, face buried in her hands. He stood helplessly for a moment before lowering himself beside her. Hesitantly, he placed a hand on her shoulder. When she didn't pull away, he gently drew her into an embrace. Soft sobs racked her frame, tears dampening his expensive suit jacket. He murmured apologies for not being there, for not knowing, for every lonely year she'd endured. She didn't respond, only cried against him, unleashing a lifetime of pent-up sorrow. His own eyes burned, and he blinked furiously, refusing to let his tears fall yet. When her weeping eased, she lifted her head. Her cheeks were streaked, eyes puffy, but she held his gaze. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted, voice trembling. "I've hated the idea of my father for so long, and now, you seem so different from what I imagined." He brushed a stray tear from her cheek, ignoring how his own heart thundered. "Take your time," he said, echoing a phrase he'd used once before. "I'll be here, for you and for your mother. You don't have to make any decisions right now." She nodded, pressing quivering lips together. Outside the wide windows, the last rays of daylight spilled gold across the horizon, casting them both in a warm glow. In that moment, father and daughter sat side by side, uncertain yet undeniably bound by the truth. Their story had taken a sharp, unexpected turn, and neither knew what waited beyond this revelation. But as Elena's tearful eyes slowly softened and Thomas's arm remained around her shoulders, there was a fragile, hopeful sense that perhaps together they could begin to mend what had been broken for so many years. They remained in that quiet lounge for a while, letting the shock and relief settle. Elena clutched a handful of tissues, her breath still unsteady. Thomas simply held her hand, silently offering his support until the flow of tears subsided. He felt the full gravity of fatherhood stirring within him, an unexpected, tender urgency. Had things been different, he might have been part of her life from the very beginning, watching her grow from a newborn into the woman she was now. That thought weighed on him with painful intensity, yet, glancing at her tear-streaked face, he felt a small spark of hope. They had found each other at last, and perhaps this was not an ending, but a fragile new beginning for them both. He squeezed her fingers lightly, gently. At length, Elena pulled herself upright and glanced around, embarrassed to have broken down so completely in front of him. She exhaled, her voice coming in a hushed tone. "I am not sure what this all means. I need time." Thomas nodded, wishing he could whisk away every doubt. He understood better than ever how delicate trust could be. They had decades of separation to confront, emotions neither had expected, and a mother in fragile condition who had guarded her secret for so long. Carefully, Thomas suggested they schedule a trip to see Rebecca together. "If you are comfortable, we can leave whenever you like," he offered, heart pounding at the thought. Elena hesitated, then agreed with a small nod, tension framed by a trembling smile. "Thank you." They departed at dawn the next day in one of Thomas's private cars, the driver instructed to take them directly to the hospital. The atmosphere in the back seat remained subdued, interrupted only by Elena's occasional deep sigh and Thomas's quiet offers of water or a comforting hand on her shoulder. It struck him how surreal this moment was. Father and daughter together for the first time, en route to see a woman who had single-handedly shaped their destinies by keeping them apart. Elena stared out the window at the blurred skyline, her thoughts opaque. Thomas guessed she must be juggling fear for her mother's health, shock at her own newly discovered paternity, and countless questions about what kind of father he might be. He felt equally anxious and unsure. Upon arrival, they navigated the sterile corridors until reaching Rebecca's room. Machines beeped softly beneath the faint hum of overhead lights. Rebecca lay propped up by pillows, her face ashen from treatments, eyes lighting up when she saw Elena approach. For a heartbeat, neither woman spoke. Then Elena rushed forward, clasping her mother's hand, tears brimming. Thomas stood nearby, reluctant to intrude. At length, Rebecca's weary gaze turned his way, flickering with gratitude. He stepped closer, uncertain how to address her now that the truth was out. She managed a faint smile, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for bringing her." Elena blinked back tears, glancing between them. Though the moment was fraught, it carried a resonance that none could deny. For the first time, they were all gathered at last. Rebecca beckoned Thomas closer, gesturing for him to take Elena's seat once the daughter reluctantly shifted aside. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she forced a thin smile. "She knows, does she not?" she asked, voice trembling. Thomas inclined his head. Elena chewed her lip, confirming the conversation had indeed happened. For an instant, none of them knew how to proceed. Rebecca closed her eyes, inhaling as though summoning courage. "I only wanted to protect her," she whispered, her hand shaking where it lay on the hospital blanket. "Please forgive me," Elena interjected softly. "Mom, no one is blaming you." Thomas nodded in agreement. Under the fluorescent lights, that brief exchange shimmered with longing and heartbreak, decades of sorrow compressed into a hospital room. Rebecca's eyes shone with grateful tears and gentle relief. A hush settled over them until a nurse entered, checking Rebecca's vitals. The nurse looked pleasantly surprised to see visitors, remarking how Rebecca often seemed lonely. Elena reddened at the reminder of her limited visits, but she swallowed her guilt and promised to stay longer this time. Meanwhile, Thomas offered to speak with the doctors again, ensuring no expense was spared. Rebecca tried to protest, her pride wounded by charity, but Elena squeezed her hand, whispering, "Let him help." The older woman finally relented, too drained to argue. After the nurse departed, Elena started updating her mother about life in the city, her work, and how everything had changed. Thomas chimed in softly, explaining that he was prepared to handle advanced treatments, clinical trials, anything necessary. Rebecca eyed him with gratitude silently. Later, while Rebecca rested, Elena and Thomas retreated to a small waiting area. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow on the white walls. Elena sank into a plastic chair, fatigue carving shadows under her eyes. Thomas sat beside her, noticing how her hands trembled slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him, offering a half smile. "I guess I'll be fine, it's just a lot." They fell silent. The bond between them still felt raw, as though they had no shared memories to anchor them. Eventually, Thomas cleared his throat. "I know words won't fix the years lost, but I want you to know you're not alone. Whatever you need, I'm here." Elena blinked back emotion, nodding slowly, uncertain how to accept such unconditional support. 2 days passed in a gentle rhythm of hospital visits and whispered conversations. Thomas and Elena often arrived together, meeting with doctors to discuss new treatment strategies for Rebecca. Sometimes Elena remained behind, reading to her mother or simply holding her hand in silence. Other times, Thomas stepped out to handle urgent business calls, though his attention never strayed far from the room at the end of the corridor. Each night, he and Elena returned to the hotel, exhausted yet strangely unified by the ordeal. Whispers circulated among the staff, but Thomas discouraged any speculation. He did, however, invite Elena to stay permanently in a comfortable suite, wanting her close for updates. She accepted hesitantly, still grappling with her role in his life and he in hers. Their bond slowly grew. On the third evening, a faint glimmer of hope emerged. The doctors reported Rebecca's vitals were stabilizing under the new medication regimen. She still faced a challenging recovery, but at least the immediate danger seemed to recede. When Elena heard the news, tears of relief glistened in her eyes. She turned to Thomas, a tentative smile trembling on her lips. "Thank you. You saved her." Thomas shook his head, reminding her that it was the doctor's expertise and Rebecca's own resilience, but Elena refused to diminish his role. Without him, they never could have afforded the treatments. As they walked through the hospital corridor, she slipped her arm through his, a gesture that spoke volumes. He felt a surge of gratitude, daring to believe they might forge a real bond. That evening, once they returned to the Harrington Majestic, Elena walked beside Thomas through the staff corridors, no longer hiding from curious glances. Word had spread about her moving into a luxurious suite, and though she still felt uncomfortable, she recognized that everything had changed since learning he was her father. Outside the elevator, they paused. Thomas looked at her with intensity, mind filled with unspoken apologies for the absence he never knew he had. "Would you join me for dinner?" he asked, wanting to share at least a small moment of normalcy. Her hesitation faded into a smile. "Yes," she murmured, stepping into the elevator by his side. As the doors slid shut, father and daughter ventured upward, hopeful that this fragile bond might finally grow into something real. That evening, the hushed ambiance of the Harrington Majestic's top-floor restaurant embraced father and daughter in a cocoon of tentative closeness. Tucked away at a corner table overlooking the city's shimmering skyline, they shared a quiet meal that felt both unusual and oddly comforting. For Elena, the lavish decor and attentive waitstaff were worlds removed from the modest life she'd known. For Thomas, this was the first time he had truly dined with someone he cared about on a personal level instead of a professional one. He observed her uncertain glances at the intricate silverware, noticing how she took shallow sips from her water glass and carefully placed it back as though fearful of breaking it. He wanted to make her feel at ease, yet he wasn't entirely sure how. When the server arrived with their orders, a delicately plated salmon for Elena, a filet mignon for Thomas, she cleared her throat, attempting a polite smile. "Thank you," she said to the waiter before focusing on Thomas. "I'm not used to this kind of place," she admitted softly, picking up her fork. "It's beautiful, but I feel a bit out of place." He nodded, setting down his cloth napkin. "I understand. Everything is so different from what you've known, but I hope it won't always feel strange." She glanced at him, searching his eyes for hidden meanings. For a moment she said nothing, only pressed her lips together thoughtfully. Then she took a careful bite of salmon, nodding in approval at the flavor. He felt relief wash over him, a small sign they were forging a new bond in these unfamiliar surroundings. Gradually, the tension eased. They spoke in cautious bursts, each question feeling like a gentle test of trust. Elena asked him about his childhood, if he'd ever imagined running an empire. Thomas revealed that he grew up in a middle-class home, his parents urging him to chase big dreams. They'd passed away before he amassed his fortune. She listened intently, absorbing details about a father she was only just beginning to understand. In turn, he probed gently about her interests, her hopes for the future. She confessed that, until recently, she'd never had time to think much beyond her mother's next hospital bill. As she spoke, her voice wavered between timid and hopeful, as though trying on the idea of a brighter tomorrow. Between courses, Thomas noticed how she kept unconsciously reaching to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, an echo of Rebecca's mannerisms all those years ago. The realization again reminded him of the vast chasm between them, the stolen decades, the experiences he had missed, the birthdays uncelebrated. Guilt mingled with gratitude. He vowed not to let her slip away now that he had a chance to know her. His paternal instincts, long dormant, stirred with each conversation. After dinner, they walked back to her suite in companionable silence, the corridor's plush carpeting muffling their footsteps. He halted at her door. "If you need anything at all, please call me," he murmured. She studied his face, seeming to sense more words lingering behind his offer. In a gentle tone, she responded, "I appreciate that." A flicker of what might have been a smile touched her lips before she entered and softly closed the door. Left alone in the hallway, Thomas stood for a few seconds, gathering himself. Then he turned away, feeling for once as if he was exactly where he should be. Over the following days, Elena alternated her time between the hotel and the hospital. She still helped with occasional housekeeping tasks, more out of habit than necessity, but Thomas had assured her that her position was secure, regardless of how many hours she put in. "Take whatever time you need," he insisted. "Your focus should be on your mother." She tried to argue that working gave her a sense of control, that idleness only fueled her anxieties. They compromised. She would continue some of her duties while also granting herself the freedom to visit Rebecca whenever she wanted. The arrangement stood as a delicate balance, one that allowed her to feel capable yet supported. Most evenings, Thomas joined her at the hospital, sitting quietly by Rebecca's bedside as Elena read from a worn paperback novel. Though the older woman's condition remained precarious, the new treatments offered a slim but tangible chance. On one such night, while Elena stepped out to speak with a nurse, Rebecca beckoned Thomas closer. Her gaze, though lined with exhaustion, still held a glimmer of her younger spirit. "Thank you," she managed, her voice faint, "for helping, for being there for her." Thomas's chest tightened. "I only regret not knowing sooner," he admitted. She nodded, pain etched in her features. "I'm sorry I robbed you of those years." A tear slid down her cheek. "But I see you with her now, and maybe it's meant to be this way. Maybe it's time for both of you to finally find each other." He placed his hand over hers gently. "We'll do our best," he promised. An unspoken understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that even if life had unfolded cruelly, they might carve something meaningful from what remained. When Elena returned, eyes curious, Thomas offered her a reassuring look. He hoped that in these final chapters of Rebecca's story, she might find some peace. It was in the midst of this fragile calm that an unexpected storm brewed. One afternoon, Thomas was in his executive office, reviewing expansion plans for the Harrington Majestic brand when his phone rang. The number belonged to a business rival named Greg Stanfield, a man well known for prying into personal affairs if it meant gaining leverage. Thomas's first instinct was to ignore the call, but something told him to pick up. The moment he answered, Greg's smooth, insinuating voice greeted him. "Harrington, I've been hearing rumors about a certain young lady on your staff. Any truth to the gossip that she's more than just an employee?" Thomas's jaw tightened. So it had begun. He kept his tone cold. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Stanfield." A soft chuckle came from the other end. "Oh, I think you do. Word travels fast when a CEO rearranges protocols for a maid. Let's just say some investors might find it curious if they knew where your priorities lie these days." Thomas's pulse throbbed. He realized with dread that Elena's identity could become a tool for corporate sharks. "Keep your nose out of my personal matters," he warned. But Greg seemed to relish his discomfort. "Certainly, Harrington, as long as your personal matters don't affect the business or overshadow certain deals we've been discussing." With that, he hung up, leaving Thomas gripping the phone with white-knuckled force. Fury and protectiveness warred within him. He recognized the unspoken threat. If Stanfield found proof that Elena was his daughter, he could spin it into a salacious scandal. He could plant doubts about Thomas's judgment, about conflicts of interest or hush-money payouts, tarnishing Harrington Global Enterprises' image. For Thomas, the question wasn't whether to keep Elena's parentage under wraps, but how to shield her from predatory opportunists. The notion that anyone might use her as a bargaining chip ignited a protective anger he'd rarely felt. That night, as Elena returned from the hospital, he intercepted her in the corridor. His expression was tense. "We need to talk." Leading her to the same quiet lounge where she'd learned the truth, he explained the call he'd received. Her eyes widened, alarm creeping into her features. "You mean your rivals could dig into my life, like reporters or tabloids?" He nodded, wincing at how dreadful it sounded. "Yes. And if your connection to me becomes public in a dramatic way, they'll feed off it. I've seen it happen. Elena's face paled. I don't want my mother's last days overshadowed by gossip. She doesn't deserve that. Thomas held her gaze, noticing how her fear sharpened her resolve. I won't let them exploit you, he said firmly. But we have to be careful. Until we figure out how best to handle the news, it might be wise to keep our relationship discreet. She absorbed his words, shoulders trembling. I understand, she whispered. But how do we do that? I'm already living in your hotel. Staff must be talking. Thomas took a measured breath. I'll make a formal announcement that you're under my personal sponsorship due to your mother's medical crisis, without specifying any deeper reason. The staff will follow my lead. As for people like Stanfield, I'll handle them. And if you need to step away from work entirely for a while, that's fine too. Elena closed her eyes, trying to steel herself. So we hide, she murmured. I barely even know you, and now we have to pretend we're nothing more than boss and employee. A wave of sorrow flickered across her face. I don't like it, but I don't want drama around my mother either. Thomas reached out and gently gripped her hands. It won't always be this way, he promised. I just need time to set certain business matters in order. After that, if you still want to step into the public eye as my daughter, I'll stand beside you. Though her lips trembled, she managed a brave nod. In that moment, Thomas recognized a strength in Elena that rivaled any boardroom maneuver he had ever witnessed. She had endured hardship, heartbreak, and confusion, yet she remained steadfast. He silently vowed to protect her, no matter the cost. They left the lounge feeling an unspoken bond strengthened by mutual resolve. Yet beyond the walls of the Harrington Majestic, the city buzzed with rumors, and certain adversaries watched, waiting for any misstep. Father and daughter would have to tread carefully if they hoped to secure a future together, one unclouded by scandal, betrayal, or secrets. And they both knew the obstacles had only just begun to surface. The days that followed slipped into a delicate dance of half-truths and careful silences. Elena continued her quiet routines at the Harrington Majestic, passing through hallways under the watchful eyes of staff, who now whispered less about her origins and more about her rumored favor with their CEO. Thomas ordered that rumors be quelled, making certain no one dared to spread idle gossip about her elevated status. He called it a special arrangement for medical reasons, and most employees, respectful of his authority, accepted this explanation without protest. Yet, as Elena walked the corridors, she sensed the subtle shift in how people glanced her way. They didn't treat her as an ordinary maid anymore. Whether out of curiosity or fear of crossing Thomas, they maintained a certain distance. Despite her discomfort, Elena threw herself into small tasks to distract her mind. She changed linens, dusted furniture, and answered guest requests with practiced efficiency. Whenever she felt the world closing in, she reminded herself that her mother's condition was gradually improving and that she was no longer alone. For so long she had yearned to know her father's identity, and now she had him standing guard like a fortress. Yet their closeness had to remain discreet. When they spoke in public, they kept a professional distance. Only in the privacy of his office or in the evenings after dinner did they share anything resembling a true father-daughter bond. In those more intimate moments, they talked about little things: music Elena liked, old sports teams Thomas once followed, the comedic mischief Elena caused as a child whenever Rebecca left her alone too long. Sometimes they laughed, and other times Elena would fall silent, her gaze turning inward, as if grappling with the memories she'd always carried. On one such evening, they met in the top-floor lounge, the same space where she'd learned the truth. Outside the tall windows, the city flickered with possibility. Elena leaned against the glass, arms folded, while Thomas poured 2 glasses of sparkling water from a crystal pitcher. Remember how we said we'd talk more about your future? He asked gently, handing her a glass. She nodded, taking a small sip. I do, but I still feel unsettled, she admitted. It's like my life just started over, yet the past is always looming. He could see the vulnerability in her eyes. We'll take it step by step. Have you thought about further schooling or any goals you'd like to pursue? I want to support you, but only if you're ready. She pressed her lips together in thought. I'd love to go back to college someday. I did a semester at a community college near our hometown before my mother got really sick. I had to drop out. Thomas nodded, recalling how she'd mentioned that once. Then maybe we can look into re-enrollment. We can explore programs in the city. Though his tone was gentle, Elena could hear the eagerness beneath it. He wanted to give her everything she'd missed. She set her glass aside, meeting his gaze head-on. I appreciate that, but it feels strange, accepting help from you after all these years without knowing you. Her words were quiet, tinged with guilt, and Thomas reached out to rest a hand on her shoulder. That's understandable. We've been thrust into each other's lives so abruptly. It's bound to feel awkward, but whatever pace you need, I'll match. She managed a tentative smile. Thank you, she whispered, voice catching. And in that hush, father and daughter forged another small link in the fragile chain that bound them, but elsewhere threats lingered. Unbeknownst to them, Greg Stanfield remained watchful, sniffing around for any details he could exploit. From discreet inquiries in the financial world, he learned that Thomas had diverted a sizable chunk of personal funds to medical expenses for a woman outside his known circle. Stanfield also discovered that the Harrington Majestic staff policies had shifted abruptly to benefit a single lower-level employee. The man's instincts flared, and he began quietly fishing for proof that Elena was more than a concerned friend or distant relative. He hired a freelance photographer to lurk around the hotel's entrances, snapping pictures of who came and went. He even encouraged a junior reporter at a business magazine to ask pointed questions about Thomas's personal life. One afternoon, while Elena was returning from the hospital, a wiry young man approached her on the sidewalk near the staff entrance. He flashed a badge from a local publication and asked if she was Miss Sullivan, the rumored protege of Thomas Harrington. Startled, she froze, uncertainty written across her face. No comment, she managed, stepping around him. But he followed, notebook in hand. Is it true Mr. Harrington is personally funding your mother's hospital stay? Any truth to the rumor he's giving you preferential treatment at work? His tone was eager, eyes bright with the potential for a scandalous scoop. Elena's pulse hammered. She clung to her resolve. I'm not discussing this. Please step aside. When he persisted, she slipped into the side door, heart pounding, praying that he hadn't caught her picture. She rushed straight up to Thomas's office, her breath shaky. He was in the middle of a conference call, but seeing the terror in her eyes, he ended it abruptly. What happened? He asked, voice taut. Elena explained the reporter's ambush, her words stumbling. Anger flared in Thomas's expression, his mouth a tight line. I'll handle this, he said tersely. He called hotel security, instructing them to remove any loitering media from private property. Then he contacted the magazine, threatening legal action if employees harassed his staff again. Only after taking these steps did he turn back to Elena, tension still darkening his face. Are you okay? He asked softly. She nodded, though tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes. I hate this feeling, she admitted, like my every move is under scrutiny, and I can't just live quietly. Thomas sighed, moving to her side. I know. If it helps, we can arrange your transportation directly from the underground garage so you won't have to walk outside. She gave a hesitant nod. I'd appreciate that. But this can't go on forever, can it? He shook his head, face grim. "I'll do whatever I must to protect you, even if it means severing certain business ties." She recognized the steel in his voice. She'd read about his prowess in negotiation, how he rarely lost a deal. Now that same fierceness extended to her defense, yet the exposure still loomed like a thundercloud. Even amid the mounting tension, Rebecca's health showed incremental signs of progress. Elena's spirits lifted each time she visited her mother and saw the slight improvements: a steadier heart rate, more alert eyes, the possibility of trying physical therapy. By the end of the week, the doctor suggested if Rebecca's condition held, she might be stable enough to transfer to a better facility in the city. Elena relayed the news to Thomas one evening in the penthouse lounge, a flicker of hope lighting her face. "The doctor says in another few weeks, if all goes well, we can move her here closer to us," she said, her voice quivering with relief. Thomas nodded with a gentle smile. "That's wonderful. I'll have my team coordinate the transfer. She'll receive excellent care." In that moment, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Leaning forward, she impulsively hugged him. Though he stiffened in surprise, he quickly relaxed, returning the embrace with fatherly warmth. That night, Elena found herself alone in her suite, reflecting on how drastically her life had changed. She had arrived at the Harrington Majestic as a desperate maid, hoping only to keep her mother alive. Now she was poised to reunite with her father, truly integrate into his life once her mother recovered. Yet the idea still felt surreal. She wasn't sure how to be a daughter to a billionaire CEO, just as he wasn't sure how to be a father to someone who'd grown up without him. Their mutual uncertainty both bound them and created a constant undercurrent of anxiety. As she drifted to sleep, she wondered what awaited them after her mother's eventual release from the hospital. Would the business world set its sights on them even more once the media caught wind of a personal connection? Or would Thomas find a way to shield her and Rebecca from intrusive speculation? She thought of the reporter who'd tried to corner her. If he had snapped a photo, could it be circulating already? The thought made her stomach twist. Meanwhile, in his penthouse office, Thomas stared at the city lights through the tall windows, wrestling with an onslaught of doubts. Perhaps he should issue a controlled press statement, acknowledging a private family matter and insisting on privacy. Or maybe he should lie low until the threat blew over. He realized with a heavy sigh that fatherhood wasn't about bullet points on a strategy sheet or a carefully timed announcement. It was about real lives, real vulnerability. He had to protect Elena without suffocating her. He had to remain present, not as a dominating CEO, but as the parent she'd never had. No contract or negotiation could guarantee their happiness, but he refused to let cynics like Stanfield poison their chance. At last, with the city's glow washing over him, Thomas made up his mind. He'd face any scandal head-on. If anyone threatened to exploit his relationship with Elena, he'd unleash every resource at his disposal. And when her mother finally joined them, they would begin again, three people bound by missed years, yet determined to shape a future where no one would dare to tear them apart. It wasn't a perfect solution, but for now it was enough to keep him moving forward. In the days leading up to Rebecca's possible transfer, the Harrington Majestic felt charged with anticipation. Elena found herself juggling a barrage of emotions: elation that her mother might soon be well enough to move, fear that the media probing would intensify, and an ever-present uncertainty about her own future. Thomas, for his part, balanced his usual slate of corporate duties with newfound vigilance, making sure her route through the hotel was shielded from prying cameras and curious strangers. He'd installed extra security measures, quietly of course, and instructed the staff to be on the lookout for anyone snooping about. Whenever Elena grew anxious, he gently reminded her that she could always retreat to her suite or call him for help. Grateful though she was, She couldn't shake the sense that trouble lay just beyond their carefully maintained walls. One early morning, while waiting in the lobby for his car to whisk him to a shareholder meeting, Thomas noticed a figure lurking near the grand entrance. Slim and dressed in understated black, the man held a phone angled in a suspicious manner, as if snapping covert photos. Thomas suppressed a surge of anger and, with a terse nod to security, indicated the man should be escorted from the premises. He made a mental note to speak to Elena about traveling exclusively via the service corridors for the next few days. He hated restricting her freedom, yet he saw no other option. Until the dust settled, or until he addressed the rumor mill head-on, he refused to risk exposing her to unwelcome publicity. Stepping into the waiting limousine, he vowed that if anyone tried to push further, he would meet them with the full force of his influence. That afternoon, Elena joined him in his office to finalize the transfer arrangements for Rebecca. Swallowing her nerves, she perched on a chair beside his imposing desk while he made phone calls. On the surface, it was a standard business protocol: calls to the hospital, calls to specialists, negotiations over insurance. But she couldn't ignore the tender way Thomas emphasized family needs, or how his voice softened whenever he clarified that no expense would be spared. She realized in that moment that, for all his power, he was simply a man trying to make up for lost time. When he hung up, smiling at her with relief, she gave him a small nod of thanks. The tension in his face melted. The transformation stunned her. Here was a father she'd never known, dropping the mantle of a guarded executive. Her heart twisted with longing for a life they could have shared sooner. By late evening, the hospital confirmed a date for Rebecca's transfer. 2 weeks from now, if her condition held steady, she would be moved to an advanced rehabilitation center just outside the city. The news sent a ripple of optimism through Elena. She climbed the stairs to Thomas's penthouse rather than taking the elevator, too restless to stand still. When she arrived, she found him seated on a sofa in the open-plan living area, scanning a legal document. He glanced up, reading the excitement on her face. "Good news?" he asked, setting aside the paperwork. Elena settled onto a nearby armchair, cheeks flushed. "They've set a date. She might be living closer to us soon." Her voice caught on the final word, though she tried to hide it. It felt momentous, picturing her mother no longer bedridden in a distant ward. They exchanged a brief, heartfelt look, each recognizing how vital this step could be, for Rebecca's health and for the fragile family they were forging. Yet neither of them realized that even as they savored that bit of hope, Greg Stanfield was busy orchestrating his next move. Days earlier, Greg had acquired a grainy photograph of Elena leaving the hospital at Thomas's side. He spent hours poring over details, matching medical billing data, tracing financial trails, waiting for the perfect angle to launch a strategic strike. That same night, in a corner booth of a dimly lit bar, he met a junior journalist desperate to make a name for himself. Over a shared drink, Greg handed over a slim folder. "Dig deeper," he urged. "Bring me evidence, anything that links Harrington's new protege to him personally. If she's family, we'll blow this wide open. If she's just his mistress, that might be even better." The journalist's eyes gleamed at the potential scandal, and Greg smirked. Regardless of the truth, the mere rumor could jeopardize Harrington's upcoming deals. Early the next morning, Elena woke to a swirl of agitation she couldn't explain. Her dreams had been jumbled, featuring images of reporters, beeping hospital machines, and Thomas's anxious face. She paced her suite, half dreading the day ahead. A knock at the door startled her. Glancing through the peephole, she was relieved to see Thomas. He wore a neat dark suit, but his expression looked troubled. She opened the door, heart stuttering at his tense posture. "Elena," he began, voice low, "we need to talk." She motioned him inside, and he stepped in, scanning the room as if checking for hidden eavesdroppers. With a grim sigh, he explained that certain sources, he didn't bother naming Stanfield, had been quietly fueling rumors about her identity. Worse, a tabloid reporter had approached one of the hospital's nurses, offering cash for private patient records. Though the nurse refused, the attempt signaled that more aggressive tactics might follow. Elena's face paled, anger sparking beneath her fear. "They have no right," she said, fists clenching. "My mother's medical details aren't some commodity." Thomas nodded, his eyes dark. "I know. I've already spoken to the hospital administration. They've tightened security around your mother's records, but we can't guarantee these parasites won't find a weaker link. They'll keep sniffing around until they spin a salacious story." She pressed her lips together, bitterness welling up. "Let them. I won't talk to them. Neither will Mom." Thomas studied her, torn between admiration for her courage and worry for her well-being. "What if they corner you again like that reporter the other day? I can't be everywhere to shield you." She inhaled shakily, wrestling with the desire to fight back. "What if we just tell the truth on our own terms?" she ventured. "If I'm your daughter, can't we release an official statement? That way the gossip has nowhere to grow." The question hung like a challenge. Thomas paced a few steps, hands clasped behind his back. Every instinct in him wanted to protect her from the public's glare. But Elena's suggestion held merit. If they controlled the narrative, perhaps the situation would be less explosive. On the other hand, it might also intensify scrutiny. Investors, partners, and critics would all want explanations. He paused, turning to face her. "It's possible," he acknowledged, "but I've been in this business a long time. Sometimes transparency kills one rumor, only to spark another. Are you ready for that kind of attention? Your life would change overnight." She hesitated, picturing paparazzi at the door, headlines blazing her name. Yet she also pictured her mother, nearing a fragile recovery, dealing with drama and endless questions. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I know I can't hide forever." A poignant silence stretched between them. Finally, Thomas's features softened. "We'll discuss it with your mother once she's stable enough. For now, I'll lean on my legal team to protect your privacy. If it gets worse, we'll consider a public statement. But only if that's what you want." Relief swept over her. She had never wanted someone else making decisions for her, but it felt good not to be alone. They agreed on this plan. Hold off on an announcement, strengthen legal boundaries, and watch for any escalating threats. That day, Elena took a different route to the hospital. Thomas's driver led her through a secured side entrance, bypassing any lurking reporters. She stayed with Rebecca for hours, chatting about mundane topics to keep her mother's spirits up. Though pale and weak, Rebecca managed occasional smiles, relieved that Elena's anxious expression seemed lighter than before. Elena felt her chest warm each time her mother found the energy to speak in a normal tone. She opted not to mention the media threats, believing it best to keep the stress off Rebecca for the moment. Late that night, father and daughter regrouped in the penthouse for a subdued dinner. Over bowls of simple soup, they exchanged updates. Thomas detailed how his security consultant had identified two suspicious individuals near the premises earlier in the day, likely hoping for a candid photograph of Elena. She, in turn, described her mother's minor improvements, how Rebecca could now read short passages without losing focus. Both news items, though wildly different, highlighted the precarious line they walked between hope and caution. Their glances frequently met with mutual reassurance, an unspoken vow to face the danger together. By the time Elena returned to her suite, exhaustion tugged at her. She stood by the window, gazing at the city lights flickering like 1,000 silent onlookers. So much remained uncertain: Rebecca's full recovery, the looming threat of scandal, her place in Thomas's corporate realm. Yet she also felt a steady undercurrent of determination. Whatever hardships the tabloids threw her way, she would endure. She had a father now, one who had promised never to abandon her again. If she had survived years of hardship while caring for her mother, she could survive public scrutiny too. Turning off the lamp, she stretched out on the bed, letting that glimmer of optimism fill her dreams. Tomorrow might bring battles, but at least she would not face them alone. Dawn arrived with a faint golden hue staining the high-rise buildings and hinting at the possibility of a peaceful day. Elena gazed through her suite's window at the slow surge of morning traffic. She had no major plans except another visit to the hospital later, but she felt restless. Her mother's transfer remained 2 weeks away, and though relief beckoned, she couldn't ignore the creeping sense of exposure, like something lurked on the edge of each new sunrise. With a determined exhale, she resolved to push past her nerves. After all, she had survived countless trials before even crossing paths with Thomas. Shortly after breakfast, she ventured into the staff areas to speak with Mary, the housekeeping supervisor who had always treated her kindly. Though she no longer needed to take on regular shifts, Elena missed the comfort of simple, routine tasks. She asked Mary if there was a sweet to prepare, something quiet and unremarkable. Mary hesitated, glancing around to ensure no eavesdroppers were about, then smiled. "Suite 1902, she replied. "Just a normal turnover. Nobody's checked in since last night. But take your time, dear." Grateful, Elena thanked her and hurried off with a sense of purpose. She reached Suite 1902, pushing a small cleaning cart that wobbled over plush carpet. Inside, she found an orderly space needing only a light vacuum and fresh linens. As she worked, the repetition steadied her thoughts. Folding towels reminded her of the early days, when all she wanted was a paycheck to keep her mother's treatments going. She recalled the moment Thomas first noticed her, how his gentle concern had felt so alien in a world that often ignored her struggles. A pang of complicated longing rippled through her chest. She wanted to be his daughter openly, freely, without anxiety over prying eyes. Yet she also feared exactly that exposure. While smoothing the bed, she heard a light knock. Heart jolting, she approached the door cautiously. To her relief, Thomas stood in the hallway, wearing his typical tailored suit and a reassuring, if wary, smile. "Mind if I step in?" he asked, voice low. She ushered him inside, closing the door behind them. He glanced around at the neat suite, then gave her a quizzical look. "You don't have to do this, you know. You aren't required to keep working." She offered a tight shrug. "I needed to feel useful, and it calms me." His expression softened. "I understand. Actually, I came to find you because there's something we should discuss." Without prompting, he walked to the suite's window, peering down at the city below. "My board meeting is tomorrow," he began, turning to face her. "I expect certain shareholders to ask pointed questions about my personal expenditures. Some might ask about you outright, why I've allocated funds for your mother, why I've changed your living arrangements. Officially, it's none of their business, but in practice, they can stir trouble if they sense impropriety. They might suggest I'm misusing corporate resources." Elena swallowed. "How do you plan to address that?" He exhaled, crossing his arms. "I'll remind them that my personal finances remain separate from company funds, yet I suspect that won't stop rumors behind closed doors." She leaned the vacuum against the wall and smoothed her rumpled uniform. "Can I help somehow? Maybe I can write a statement, clarifying that these expenses are your personal choice, not the company's." He shook his head, though touched by her willingness. "No, you needn't expose yourself to them. The less they see you, the less ammunition they have. This meeting will be behind closed doors, but anything said inside often leaks." His gaze flicked to the floor. I just want you prepared in case a story breaks sooner rather than later." They stood in silence, the hush of the room thick with unspoken tension. At last, Elena steeled herself. "I'm not ashamed of who I am," she said, voice trembling only slightly. "Whatever they say, that's on them. I don't want you to fight alone." Something in her words made him close the distance, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. His voice turned rough with feeling. "You have no idea how much that means to me. But let me protect you if I can. I've spent my life navigating boardroom politics. You shouldn't have to endure their prying." She nodded reluctantly, aware that his concern arose from genuine paternal care. Before he left, he gave her a small folded card. "These are my direct numbers," he said. "If anything strange happens, even if you suspect someone's following you, call me right away." She slipped the card into her pocket, biting her lip. "All right," she agreed. He left with a final nod, and Elena stood alone again, chest tight with gratitude and apprehension. The next morning dawned bright, ironically so, given the tension swirling in Thomas's schedule. Elena tried to distract herself by visiting her mother. On arrival, she found Rebecca able to sit up more comfortably, flipping through a magazine with shaky hands. Elena's heart leapt. "You look stronger," she said softly, taking a seat by the bed. Rebecca smiled, thin but genuine. "The doctors say I've turned a corner." Then, quieter, she added, "How are you holding up? Your father told me about the pressure you're under." Elena blinked at the word father. It still felt surreal. "I'm managing," she said. "He's trying to keep me out of the spotlight." Rebecca set the magazine aside, focusing on her daughter. "You both deserve peace," she murmured. "I'm sorry for everything I kept from you. If I had been braver, you wouldn't be caught in this chaos." Elena shook her head, tears threatening. "Don't say that. If you'd told him back then, maybe the world would have been just as unkind. We can't go back. All that matters is you're getting better now, and we have a chance to be a family." Hearing those words made Rebecca's eyes shine. "Then we move forward," she said. "No more hiding from the past. I know Thomas is a good man, despite how I once feared he'd reject us." They fell into comfortable conversation, talking about a future where Rebecca could finally enjoy the city, watch Elena pursue her goals, and maybe even see Thomas's boardroom. Elena left the hospital feeling a buoyant hope she hadn't experienced in years. Heading back in the sedan Thomas insisted she use, she tried not to let the lurking possibility of scandal overshadow that fragile optimism. Meanwhile, the Harrington Global Board meeting was in full swing on the upper floors of the corporate tower downtown. Thomas sat at the head of a long glass table, facing half a dozen directors, major investors, and a few external advisors. Early on, the discussion ran through typical metrics: profit margins, new acquisitions, expansions. Yet from the corner of his eye, Thomas caught a flicker of interest from two board members allied with Greg Stanfield. They bided their time, pouncing once the finance officer concluded her report. One of them, a silver-haired man with a perpetual frown, cleared his throat. "Thomas, there's a concern among some shareholders about personal expenditures. We notice certain large sums being withdrawn from your private accounts in connection to the Harrington Majestic staff. This begs the question of conflict of interest." The man's tone remained oddly polite, but Thomas recognized the predatory undertone. Another board member, equally gray and austere, chimed in. "Yes, we've heard chatter about a young woman receiving special treatment. Might you clarify?" Thomas's insides coiled with anger, but he feigned composure. "My private accounts are not subject to board approval. I have complete authority on personal spending. As for rumors, there is no policy violation. The employee in question has encountered a severe family crisis, and I chose to assist. That's the full extent of it." He locked eyes with them, daring them to push further. They exchanged a knowing glance, not fully satisfied, but wary of an outright confrontation. He sensed they wanted more details, perhaps hoping to catch him in a misstep. Yet he refused to yield any personal confession. He steered the discussion back to corporate matters until the meeting adjourned. Still, as he exited the room, an uneasy weight pressed on his mind. Even if he had parried this round of questions, the appetite for gossip clearly hadn't subsided. Outside the glass doors, Stanfield himself stood, arms folded, wearing a smug half-smile. "Heard the session got interesting," Stanfield drawled. "You must be tired of dodging rumors." Thomas regarded him with ice-cold calm. "I'm surprised you bother listening to idle talk, Greg. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't poke around my personal life." He turned to leave, but Stanfield's next words made him pause. "Or what? You'll bury me in lawsuits?" The man's smile widened. "You know, if you just admitted she's your daughter, it might be simpler, but people do love a scandal." Thomas forced himself not to lash out. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Some lines shouldn't be crossed." Stanfield's grin twisted. "Oh, I'm crossing them already," he answered, then strolled off. Thomas's stomach churned at that final remark. He suspected Stanfield had bigger plans than boardroom theatrics. For Elena's sake, he had to stay 2 steps ahead. Back at the Harrington Majestic, evening set in. Thomas found Elena in the private lounge, reading in a chair by the window. She looked up, instantly sensing his tension. "Rough day?" she asked gently. He offered a grim nod. "The board is sniffing around, and Stanfield is more brazen than ever." She shut her book, a frown marking her brow. "Then maybe we shouldn't wait. Let's just tell people the truth." Her voice held an unsteady resolve. Thomas sank onto the adjacent chair, burying his face in his palms. "You know what that entails. Once it's out, there's no going back." Elena leaned forward. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "Not if it means we finally stop hiding." He studied her for a long moment, his chest tightening with a swirl of admiration and dread. "I'll talk to my PR team," he whispered, voice hoarse. "We'll handle this carefully." Outside, the city glowed beneath a moonlit sky, unknowing of the storm about to break. Elena shut her eyes, inhaling deeply. Whatever the fallout, they would stand together. In the distance, thunder rumbled, as though the world itself braced for what came next. Thomas paced the length of his penthouse living room, phone pressed to his ear, while Elena sat on the sofa, clutching a glass of water she scarcely sipped. Outside, the city sprawled under a subdued gray sky, the previous night's thunder echoing in her memory. She could still feel the tension in every breath. Across the suite, a television on low volume showed a news channel with scrolling tickers, an endless stream of stories that might soon feature her own. She heard Thomas thanking someone and then hanging up, exhaling hard. "That was the PR director," he explained. "We're setting up a small press statement for tomorrow. It'll confirm you're my daughter and request privacy due to your mother's condition." His tone quivered with the weight of it. "We'll keep details minimal, but it'll be official. The board can't twist it into a secret scandal if we lay out the truth on our own terms." Elena let out a shaky breath, nodding. "I'm ready," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure. At least she wouldn't cower from the prospect. She reminded herself that truth was preferable to endless speculation. Later that afternoon, they visited Rebecca. The familiar beep of medical machines greeted them as they entered her hospital room. She seemed more alert than usual, propped up on pillows. Her gaze shifted between her daughter's drawn expression and Thomas's tight shoulders. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. Elena explained in hushed tones that they planned to go public with their relationship, Thomas's fatherhood, her status as his daughter, so that no rumor could hold them hostage. "I don't want to cause you stress, Mom, but it's time," Elena said, voice trembling. Rebecca reached for her hand, eyes glistening. "I'm proud of you," she murmured, though she glanced at Thomas with concern. "I just hope the press won't hurt her." Thomas pressed a gentle hand over Rebecca's. "I'll protect her, and you, whatever it takes." A quiver of relief passed over the older woman's face. Though frail, she managed to smile. "Then do it." That evening, father and daughter reviewed the draft statement Thomas's team had prepared. It was brief and respectful. It confirmed that Elena was his biological daughter, born from a past relationship that remained private. It asked the media to respect her wish for peace, particularly given her mother's health crisis. Elena read it twice, each line bringing a swirl of discomfort and resolve. Once she approved, Thomas sent the final version to his PR director, who promised to release it early in the morning, ahead of any damaging leaks. Despite her nerves, Elena slept more soundly than she expected. When dawn broke, she found herself pacing her suite, waiting for a storm to descend. Instead, a cautious hush pervaded the corridors. She dressed in simple clothes, jeans and a neat blouse, then ventured to the lounge where Thomas awaited her with newspapers spread across a table. Several had already updated their online editions. One article, posted overnight, bore the headline, "Thomas Harrington confirms he has an adult daughter." Below that, a carefully worded subheading noted the situation was private, linked to a past love, and overshadowed by medical urgency. Elena's heart fluttered, scanning for any sign of mockery or scandalous rumor. While some commentary couched the news in speculation, the tone was calmer than she'd feared. Thomas met her uncertain gaze, motioning to a seat beside him. "It could have been worse," he acknowledged. "The official statement seems to have tempered the frenzy. They haven't spun it into a seedy expose, at least not yet." Though relief mingled with dread, Elena felt a tentative spark of hope. A weight had lifted, and she no longer felt shackled by secrets. "What now?" she asked, her voice subdued. He reached for her hand. "We move forward. If you're comfortable, we can appear together at a brief press gathering next week just to show we're united. That might discourage further attacks." Her chest tightened at the thought, but she managed a nod. Their plan worked for the most part. Over the next few days, as media outlets tried to spin fresh angles on the story, they found little fodder. Thomas refrained from discussing private details, and Elena followed his lead. She switched from housekeeping tasks to smaller, discreet roles in the hotel offices, mostly out of view. Though a few bold reporters still lingered near the Harrington Majestic's entrances, they lacked any sensational twist. The hush money rumor didn't gain traction once it became clear Elena was indeed his daughter, not a hidden lover or scandalous affair. Meanwhile, the board saw no advantage in challenging Thomas publicly. To them, a sudden paternal revelation was awkward, but not a direct threat to corporate success. Even Greg Stanfield seemed momentarily checked, though his sly grin at the next meeting suggested he was disappointed he hadn't cornered Thomas with a sensational scandal. Thomas remained vigilant. He suspected Stanfield might still strike at a vulnerable moment, but for now, the advantage lay with father and daughter. Together, they had turned a potential firestorm into a subdued story that most tabloids abandoned for juicier fare. As the dust settled, a quieter triumph emerged. Rebecca's condition improved enough to attempt the transfer. One crisp morning, an ambulance transported her to the specialized facility near Midtown, its architecture all gleaming glass and bright corridors. Elena traveled with her, holding her hand through every bump in the road while Thomas coordinated every last detail from his office. Once Rebecca was settled into a private suite with advanced monitoring equipment, Elena dialed his number, her voice brimming with relief. "She's comfortable, Dad," she said, hesitating over the new word. She found it slipped out with surprising ease. "Thank you for making all this possible." On the other end, she heard him inhale sharply. "Anything you need, Elena," he replied, voice hushed. A few days later, during visiting hours, the three of them sat together in Rebecca's bright, sun-warmed room. Dappled light fell across the bed. Machines beeped softly, but their comforting rhythm was overshadowed by the possibility that Rebecca might soon begin physical therapy. She was far from cured, yet she felt more alive, more certain of a future. Thomas had brought flowers, a sprawling bouquet that Elena teased was large enough to fill a garden. He shrugged with playful guilt. "I overdid it," he admitted, "but I wanted to brighten the place." Rebecca's chuckle turned into a cough, but her eyes shone. "I'm grateful," she said. "For the first time in a long while, I'm thinking about tomorrow." In that light-filled room, it was easy to imagine a genuine family forming, one that no rumor or rivalry could easily dismantle. While Elena poured water into plastic cups, Thomas helped Rebecca shift pillows for comfort. There was no friction, no second-guessing, only a shared rhythm of care. Sometimes Elena paused to watch them, her mother and father conversing quietly like old friends. They'd lost so many years, but here they were, oddly harmonious, bound by a love that took root despite every obstacle. In the weeks that followed, Elena settled into a different routine. She helped her mother transition to mild physical exercises guided by cheerful therapists. She continued to live in the Harrington Majestic, though Thomas offered a more permanent suite if she chose. She remained cautious, wanting to establish her independence at her own pace. Even so, they frequently shared dinners in his penthouse. Their laughter came more easily now, at times shy, at times brimming with genuine delight. Occasionally, they disagreed. Elena insisted on paying some expenses once she found her footing. Thomas objected, but her fierce pride impressed him. Step by step, they stumbled through the ordinary father-daughter dynamics that many took for granted. Every awkward conversation, every gentle reconciliation, felt like progress. When her mother was deemed fit for brief outings, Elena and Thomas accompanied her in a specially arranged car. Together they strolled the quiet paths of a nearby botanical garden, marveling at late-season blooms. Rebecca's pace was slow, but her spirits soared. A discreet security guard trailed at a respectful distance in case a stray reporter appeared. None did. Perhaps the gossip had finally burned out. As they paused before a vibrant bed of lilies, Rebecca settled on a bench. Thomas offered her a careful hand, and she eased into place, exhaling with quiet satisfaction. Elena sat beside her, leaning her head against Rebecca's shoulder. "I never thought life could be like this," she murmured. Her mother smiled, eyes misting. "Me neither," she said, glancing gratefully at Thomas. He stood a few steps away, gaze wandering over the garden. He seemed momentarily lost in thought until he turned to them with a soft smile. Elena patted the bench, inviting him closer. He sat, tentative, and they watched sunlight dance across bright petals. No cameras flashed, no intruders demanded statements. Just three people forging the family they had once been denied. By the time the sun dipped lower, they made their way back to the waiting car. Rebecca leaned on Elena's arm while Thomas held the door. The guard offered quiet assistance, and then they headed back to the facility. In that moment, Elena realized that although challenges surely remained, boardroom tensions, Stanfield's lurking opportunism, and the ever-present uncertainty of her mother's health, they had arrived at a place of possibility. She and Thomas might never reclaim all the time they'd lost, but they owned tomorrow. That evening, Elena sat in her suite, a journal open on her lap. She hadn't written in years, but tonight she felt compelled. Slowly, she penned a single line. "We found each other at last, and we will not let go." Outside, the city glowed with the hush of twilight. She closed the journal, heart steady, no longer bound by the same fear. Whether as the CEO's daughter or simply as Elena, she was free to exist under her father's protection and her mother's hopeful gaze. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole.